Hi and welcome to a Christmas storytelling. I will make this short, so first let me thank you for listening and secondly I wish you all a Merry Christmas. This narration will be 10 short Christmas stories and done without much breaks, and just a black screen with a signature toxic skull sound theme. So without further ado, enjoy! There's a reason your parents want you sound asleep when Santa comes to the house. There's a reason it's even mentioned in Christmas songs. It's because Santa is not the one who comes to your house on Christmas Eve. Santa's not the one that leaves the presents. He's not the one who eats the cookies, or fills the stockings. He's not the one in the red outfit who crawls down your chimney. Santa's the one that makes the toys. Something else delivers them. How else do you think he does it? One man? One fat, out of shape man, rounding the world in one night? Impossible. He could never do it without help. I know because I've seen it. One Christmas Eve, long after my parents had gone to bed, long after they'd given their warnings, my brother and I crept out of our room to investigate. My brother was 3 years younger than me, barely 4 years old, and it was a challenge keeping him quiet as we kept vigil at the top of the stairs. We had a clear line of sight to the Christmas tree, but we managed to be relatively hidden behind the railing in the unlit hallway. And sometime, after an eternity of waiting, we heard something coming, something slithering, down the chimney. Not quite a man, not quite a snake. 2 pairs of arms, thin and muscular. Shiny, neon, lizard yellow eyes, a flashy row of sharpened needle teeth. Something on the top of the head too spiky to be hair and too pliable to be bone. It moved fast, quickly sliding around the tree and placing the presents. With multiple arms it could eat the cookies we left out, drink the milk, and still stack packages. I was old enough to be horrified by its mottled gray skin and fiendish fangs, but my little brother was too young to be afraid. Santa! He called out, recognizing only the uniform. I tried to hush and grab him, but he was already awkwardly making his way down the stairs, arms outstretched, smile on his face, while I stayed wrapped in shadow. I know why your parents don't want you up when Santa comes to the house. I know why Santa's outfit is red. I know cookies aren't Santa's favorite snack. I used to have a brother, but after that Christmas, I'm the only one who remembers him. Barely. And now, even his name escapes me. If you want a truly Merry Christmas, be sure you're asleep when he arrives. And don't fake it. He knows when you're awake. The first present was on my doorstep. The little red box had a big bow and a type tag reading, "From your secret Santa." It made me smile. My apartment complex is pretty friendly and I regularly hung out with the people on my floor. I tucked the little gift into my purse, figuring I'd open it at work. When I got to work, I found another present on my desk, this one in green. Again, the tag read, "From your secret Santa." That was a little strange. I didn't work with any of my neighbors and none of my coworkers knew where I lived. But then again, it could just be a coincidence. I decided to open both boxes, telling myself I was being silly. The first box held a ticket to a showing of It's a Wonderful Life, my favorite Christmas movie. That was actually pretty sweet. The second box held a miniature bottle of white Zinfandel, my favorite wine. Okay. Still nice. But I didn't remember mentioning my wine preferences to anyone at work. I tried to put it out of my mind, but it was difficult with the boxes sitting on my desk. I ended up stuffing them in a drawer until the end of the day. I was exhausted when I finally got to my car and ready to get home. I was so preoccupied with thoughts of dinner and Netflix that I almost sat on the little white box in the driver's seat. How did it get there? I was sure I'd locked my car. Fear flickering through me, I snatched up the box, slid into my car, and locked the doors. I barely glanced at the "From your secret Santa" tag before ripping the box open. Inside was a golden ring. Picking it up, I realized it was set with an opal and 2 little diamonds, just like my grandmother's ring. But that was locked away in a safety deposit box. How could it have possibly gotten here? When I got home, a small gold box waited on my doorstep. I didn't touch it. Instead, I fumbled with my keys, panicking as I tried to unlock the door. Was this person watching me? Following me? It was the only thing that made sense. As soon as I was inside, I locked the deadbolt and dug my phone out of my purse. I needed the police. I dialed 911 and put the phone to my ear, heart hammering. The dial tone was still ringing when I felt hot breath on my neck. "What's wrong?" An unfamiliar voice said in my ear. "You didn't open your present." My mother's boyfriend Gary was a terrible person to be around. He hated me, hated kids in general. His obsession with staying fit did not bode well for my overweight 9-year-old self. He picked on me every chance he got. When the earthquake hit the night before Christmas, he banged on my bedroom door. "Max, you fat slug. Why are you shaking the house?" I waited until he crawled back in bed, and then I began my search. I had heard of the stories of coal being put in stockings as a form of punishment. Even though Gary was an adult, the look on his face would provide a priceless Christmas morning memory. Now, I had no clue where to find coal, but finding rocks would suffice. I snuck outside and wandered the yard in search of anything that looked even remotely close to coal. In the back of our yard, I spotted something glimmering in the dirt. I picked up the cluster of rocks and stuffed them in my pocket. Our stockings were already hanging up, so I tiptoed over to Gary's and emptied a handful of rocks. After getting a good night of sleep, I rushed downstairs into the living room. My mother and Gary were already on the couch waiting for my arrival. "Stocking time. Honey, why don't you get the fireplace going?" Mom said. Gary groaned and started up the fire. I rushed through the opening of my stocking, eagerly awaiting Gary to reach into his. "What the hell is this shit? Did you dump this in here, Valerie?" I giggled and Gary shot me an evil stare, like he was going to pummel me if I let one more chuckle slip. The glimmering rocks he held proceeded to hiss and pop and bounce around in his hand. He tried to release them, but the rocks seeped into his skin. "It burns," he shouted. Gary stood up in front of the fireplace. His right hand grew to the size of his head. I could see the burrowed rocks traveling up his arm. Gary's entire body inflated until he was as wide and tall as our front door. And then it happened. He exploded. Bloody chunks of my mother's boyfriend painted the room. Speechless and shocked, my mother and I walked into the backyard without saying a word to each other. And that's when we saw it. The giant hole. I soon learned that what I discovered in the dirt the night before Christmas was a meteorite. Every day it gets a little bit colder out here. This time of year, it's hard to live without a place to spend the night. Standing on the side of the road, I hold out my cup, waiting for the next red light. It's been a while since I stopped shivering. But I know that's not a positive sign. One step closer to hypothermia is what that means. One step closer to freezing to death. I've seen it before. I set the cup down between my feet, holding it in place with my toes, which are also numb, and I blow a hot breath of air on my fingertips. I do this several times until I can feel something in the tips of them again. Snow begins to fall and I look up at the sky and stick my tongue out, catching the flakes. I don't want a white Christmas. But here it comes anyway. The blizzard begins to come down and the car traffic disappears completely, except for the odd vehicle trudging through the snow, attempting to brave the weather to do some last-minute shopping on Christmas Eve, or to get to a family dinner. I can almost smell the roasting turkey, like my mom used to make. The gravy and stuffing. The mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. I can practically taste my dad's endless hors d'oeuvres and his famous charcuterie plate. As I think about these things with my hand stuck out holding my cup full of petty change, time begins to mean nothing after a while. I drift off and think about being warm, inside the house in front of the fire, eating turkey sandwiches with gravy and opening presents under the tree. Hot chocolate and marshmallows and waiting for Santa Claus to come down the chimney. A voice startles me awake and I realize two people are standing over me. I have been sitting on the curb in a daze and allowing the snow to collect upon me, covering me in a thick suit of crystal white powder. "Look, Daddy. Someone built a little snowman on the side of the road." It is the voice of a little boy and I can't help but feel like he sounds familiar. Somebody left a cup here too, for donations. "Can I leave $1, Dad? Can I?" Another voice replies, this one even more familiar, and I realize who they are. "Sure, son. Go ahead. Make a wish when you do. It's Christmas, after all." I felt the weight of a coin dropping into the can I held in my hand. "I wish that Greg would come back home," said the boy. "So do I," said the man, as the two of them walked away. "So do I. I wanted to chase after them. To go with them. I tried to move but couldn't budge from the curb where I was frozen. My lips wouldn't open to scream. And the snow began to fall again." The delicious scent of perfectly cooked honeyed ham filled the kitchen as Martha opened the oven. "Oh, the family was going to love it. Dinner is served," Martha sang as she carried the ham into the dining room. Her husband and kids turned to look, their eyes wide as saucers. "Sorry it took so long, but now we can eat." Martha lovingly set the ham down among the many side dishes, rosemary scalloped potatoes, candied yams, and pineapple stuffing. She served everyone a hearty scoop of each, crowning every plate with a generous serving of ham. Eager to begin her meal, Martha was about to sit when she realized she'd skipped the final step. "Silly me," she laughed, rising again. "You can't eat like that. Just give me a second." She went around the table, carefully peeling away the duct tape from her daughters' and sons' mouths. When she got to her husband, he started chattering. "Marty, you don't have to do this, I swear to God. I'll never threaten to leave you again." "Oh hush," Martha said, frowning. This wasn't how it was supposed to go at all. "Hush and eat your dinner, there's a good boy. At least let the kids go." Her husband's eyes were panicked, glancing at their children, then away. "I'll stay here forever, I promise, just please, let the kids." "That's enough of that." Martha replaced her husband's duct tape, then sat at the head of the table. "Go on," she said to her son and daughter. "Eat up. It'll get cold." Shifting uncomfortably in their seats, the children picked up their silverware and began to pick at their food. It was difficult to maneuver with the rope binding them to the chairs, but they managed. Smiling with bliss, Martha poured herself a glass of champagne and watched her happy family enjoy their meal. It was the perfect way to spend Christmas Eve. And her husband was right, he wasn't going to leave her. None of them were. In fact, no one would ever be leaving the house again. Martha smiled. "Don't forget to leave room for dessert." Arthur sat alone in his chair, warming himself by the electric fire he couldn't really afford to have on. This time of year in particular was the hardest. Christmas. Outside, the world was blanketed in white, the dark days illuminated with fairy lights trailing from house to house. Sometimes he ventured outside into the vicious cold and became another invisible old burden. Shuffling through the shops he purchased items his family had enjoyed when they were still alive. After Eights, Quality Street, the radio and TV times. He tried to watch the shows he had enjoyed as a child, a wearisome attempt to ignite the youthful joy inside. They had not aged well and looked pathetic. Arthur often pushed reality aside to make existing tolerable. He tried to make conversation with shop staff, but he could tell they were uninterested. Neither had he received a single Christmas card despite sending plenty. People complained they were always too busy and would signal they were donating to a charity instead. That was an admission of apathy, of laziness, and it angered him. Every night he stared out of his sash window at the families making their way home through the snow. He castigated himself for wasting all his years but never wept over it. His father always told him that only girls cry. Even at the funeral he kept his tears hidden. Every day was more turgid than the last until Christmas Day came upon him. He often slept on the sofa now, hating the isolation his bedroom represented. A family home without a family was just a box of miseries. Arthur dreamed of when he was young, his parents sitting beside him, encouraging him to open the presents that Santa had brought him. The Christmas dinners, the laughter at the TV comedy specials, and the smell of the pines all felt so real. When he awoke he cried for the first time in over 70 years. He was so unhappy, so miserable, so alone, so ashamed. There was a knock at the door and it startled him. He made his way to open it while wiping his wrinkled face. Facing him was a child-sized doll. It reminded Arthur of himself when he was 8 years old. His immediate impulse was to shut the door, but the doll held out its hand. "Can I come in out of the cold?" it asked. Arthur took hold of the tiny plastic hand and led it into the living room. The old man was astonished to find a large pile of presents underneath his tree. Together, they unwrapped them. Toys from his younger days, pristine and untouched. For the first time in years he was having fun. They played all day long. Eventually, they became tired and went upstairs. Holding hands they both gently, finally went to sleep. 18 months later, Arthur's decomposed body was discovered. Handcuffed to him were the rotting remains of a child who had been reported missing around the same time. I saw him at the Christmas parade, staring overlong at the children. I remembered him. I remember exactly what he did to me. Thanks to him I had become what I truly am. No going back. I waited in the shadows, lurked behind the pre-lit trees, danced around the 12-foot snowmen, and manually moved the mouths of the larger-than-life nutcrackers. I was invisible here. The family's full with children's laughter. Christmas spirit all around. I never lost track of him though. The crowd started to thin. Jingle bells blasting over the outdoor concert speakers stopped mid-sentence. He was still there, scuttling around. Looking for the lost and endangered, no doubt. And here I was, looking for him. The lights turned off. It was mostly silent. There was a girl here alone, playing at the water's edge. She looked dirty. She probably just came down for the parade. I saw him move closer to her, looking around to make sure that no one was watching. But I was there. Hiding behind the show tree. The behemoth that stood 25 feet. Turned off now, the lights still warm from the action earlier. He began to move quickly, so sudden that she dropped her stick and turned, startled, towards him. Yes, he was quick. But I was quicker. The girl looked to me with desperation in her eyes. I caught him, as he turned around to see what she was glancing at. I threw the string of green Christmas lights around his neck and pulled with all of the force my body could handle. He didn't expect it. He fell to the ground and began to tug at the lights. The little girl ran off. I tightened the strand and pulled myself closer to him. Close enough that he would recognize me. He was stronger than me, sure. But I knew never to underestimate the element of surprise. I wrapped the lights around and around. So tightly, that the little bulbs began to bust from the force of it. His face was red, and then blue, and then nothing at all. I drug his body under the large tree. I pulled a Santa hat off of a neighboring elf and placed it upon his head. "You're welcome, town," I thought aloud to myself. "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good and safe night." Since as long as I can remember, my childhood buddy and I meet up on the 1st of December. Josh and I grew up together in Greenwood Towers and our mums were both single parents. Each would look after one another's kid, if the other had to work. He turned up, late as usual, but apologized with a huge grin on his face. I laughed at the ludicrous but admittedly impressive Banjo-Kazooie Christmas jumper he was wearing. "Where's yours, you miserable old sod?" he asked, handing me several bottles of expensive-looking wine. I unzipped the tracksuit top I'd been wearing to proudly exhibit my Luigi's Mansion jumper, complete with purple LED lights for the booze eyes. "That is awesome," Josh exclaimed. "Awesome to the max." He was a big Futurama fan, and he couldn't believe they were still making the show. Season 35 was his favorite. I led him to the living room where he saw the Nintendo 64 plugged in, Mario Kart 64 demonstrating on the TV screen. "Our mums used to play this with us all the time," Josh remarked. I could see he was getting upset. "Listen," he said. "I have something to show you in the garden." He took me outside where there was a tall, metal house. How on earth did he get that here without me knowing? I counted 24 numbered doors and Josh told me to open number 1. There was a glass box and inside, dangling from the ceiling like a demented decoration, was the limbless body of a woman. Thin translucent tubes coiled into her body, pumping her full of God knows what. Her eyes widened in dread when they opened. I recognized her immediately. "Is that Frogface?" I asked. Josh nodded. She was the first one I found. Most I've had for years, but I finally tracked down the last one a month ago. Ironic that there's 24 of them still alive. "Here, press this." Josh pointed to a green button on the box and I placed my thumb on it. Frogface began to squirm as a clear liquid poured over her. I smelled brandy. Then a flame sailed down and she was set alight like a Christmas pudding. When we were both 9, Frogface and the other Greenwood tenants conspired to get us evicted. They thought our mothers were prostitutes, but their only crime was having to work all day and all night to keep a roof over our heads and feed us. So, on that Christmas Eve, we were made homeless, sent out into the wicked winter storms. Our mothers died of hypothermia trying to keep us warm. We would have died too if a party secretary and his wife hadn't found us. As Frogface burned alive, I looked into the distance at the towering monuments of Josh, our dear leader, ruler of our nation. His security detail was spotted over my garden. I was so proud of how far he'd come. And I had another 23 doors to open. Jody stood watching the office holiday party with a cup of punch and a sneer. No one talked to her, and that was the way she liked it. Her eyes slid over the crowd, ferreting away knowledge. Debbie was throwing herself at Stephen again. The girl really was pathetic. Rod was going on and on about his golf swing. You could see poor Fred falling asleep on his feet listening. And then, hello. Who is that? A tall woman was talking to Diana, her back to Jody, who in the office had long brown hair and wore gray pencil skirts. Jody narrowed her eyes. Had someone from another department come down to schmooze? Did their manager know? Jody doubted it. Well, whoever their manager was, they were about to find out. As stealthily as she could manage in heels, Jody wound around her coworkers, trying to keep an eye on the mysterious stranger. But just when she was about to reach them, Brett waddled his fat ass in between. "Excuse me," he huffed as he sidled past. "Excuse me." By the time he was gone, the stranger had disappeared. Undeterred, Jody rose to her tiptoes and scanned the crowd. There! In the back, heading toward the hallway. Jody scampered off, using a few well-placed elbows to get through the packed space. To her dismay, the hallway was empty. How was the stranger moving so fast? Glancing around, she just managed to catch sight of the stairwell door before it clicked shut. Bingo! Jody power walked to the stairwell and yanked it open. No one in sight, but she heard the distinct sound of footsteps leading down. With self-righteousness swelling in her chest, Jody followed. She tried to move as quickly as possible, but the stranger was always a floor ahead. Down they went, ground floor, garage, basement, sub-basement. Jody's feet ached by the time she reached the last door, but the triumph dulled the pain. The sub-basement was storage only. There would be no escape for the mysterious stranger. Jody headed inside. The lights were dim, many bulbs burnt out. Dozens of box-bearing shelves stretched in all directions. Jody started forward cautiously, looking around for the stranger. Behind her, the lock clicked. Jody whirled around and stared in horror. The brown-haired woman in the gray pencil skirt faced her, except she had no face. As Jody watched, the blank skin filled out, mouth and eyelids opening in the flesh, familiar features emerging. Soon, Jody met the eyes of her mirror image. "Merry Christmas," faux Jody said. Its arm swung out, too long, the crowbar in its hand slamming into Jody's temple. Jody crumbled, darkness dancing in front of her eyes. The faux Jody knelt and began taking her shoes. "Why?" Jody managed as blood poured from her head. Faux Jody gave her a pitying look. "You've been made redundant," she said. Jody knew no more. "My friend and I saw a ghost." "I know, but there's no other way to explain what we saw. It happened this Saturday just gone at the halls of residence where we live. So, it's early afternoon, and my bags are packed. I'd be gone already, but I can't get a lift until tomorrow. The other students have left, and the place has fallen eerily quiet. There's only me and my mate, Ben, in the whole building. At least, that's what I thought. Because I'm hearing shuffling noises coming from the room next to mine. It's Adam's room, in between mine and Ben's. I thought he'd gone as well. I mean, I overheard him on the phone during the week. And it was pretty clear he was going to be leaving on Friday. In fact, yesterday tea time I heard him lock his door and go. It's been silent since then. Until now, that is, so I'm guessing he's still in. So, I'm lying on my bed and staring at the ceiling, listening to those noises, which come and go. But they're not the noises Adam usually makes, like a trip to the bathroom or preparing food. They're sort of slowly pacing. Long periods of silence, then slow, ominous creaking of floorboards. I decide to take a nap. But just as I drop off, I snap awake with the impression that I've been hearing whispering in my ear. There's an evil new idea in my head, and I exchange messages with Ben. We're gonna play a prank on Adam. It's nighttime. There's an air vent leading from my room into Adam's, and another one between Adam's and Ben's. Ben places his phone between the slats of his air vent, and I feed a long net curtain wire into Adam's room. The other end of the wire touches the sleeping Adam, and he freaks out. Footsteps go thudding toward the light switch, and I withdraw the wire. I sit in front of my laptop and enjoy the spectacle, courtesy of the live feed from Ben's phone. I'm wondering why Adam has put his bedsheet over his head. He walks toward the other air vent and stops for a while. Then he turns to face the wall next to my room and walks toward it. Then he walks straight through it. I leap up from my chair and stare at the wall, expecting him to come through, but nothing emerges. Adam's room is empty. I unlock the door and run out into the hallway. Ben's standing outside his room, looking as shocked as I am. It's Sunday, and we confess our crimes to another student, who points out our prank is not possible to pull off because of the configuration of the air vents. We can't prove otherwise because Ben's camera recorded no images. However, it did record some audio. When the specter stood facing Ben's air vent, the audio picked up a raspy sounding voice. It said, "Merry Christmas."